I've come to say a word about the leading tone. You all remember the leading tone, back when you learned about the scale. Remember the scale? And some of these scale notes have names. There's the tonic, the dominant, and the leading tone. And these stay the same when we go into minor. And when we make a cadence, you hear how the leading tone leads. Now, if for some reason we get in mind to lower the leading tone, we get a mode, the Mixolydian mode. If we start with the minor scale, we get the Dorian mode. There are some other modes, Locrian, Phrygian, but you have to pay extra for those. They're not included in this particular package. Now, if I make the cadence with the lowered leading tone, we really feel the modal inflection, and we sense that we're a bit adrift. And that's all I have to say about the leading tone. Now to the, thank you very much. Yes, thank you. The leading tone has never been given its appreciation like this. Well, the music on our program, Peggy Glanville-Hicks, she was Australian. She studied at the Royal College in London with R.V.W., whose Fourth Symphony begins with an idea she claimed he took from her own Sinfonietta for small orchestra. This is one of many threads, including her marital history, mode of dress, career as music critic, that we just don't have time to follow up here, beyond saying that Byron assures me of R.V.W.'s innocence in the matter. Now, Glanville-Hicks's Satie-like pastoral for piano solo is the very model of diatonic writing as opposed to chromatic writing. I'll play a bit of it here. I'll play it with one hand. I can go through the whole first page without playing a single black key. But all of a sudden, right near the end, a shocking F sharp comes in. And then there are a few more chromatic notes, E flat, D sharp, C sharp, and then a pause, a fermata to get over the stress of those four notes. And then for the rest of the piece, the second page, not another black key. You can hardly find a more perfect example of diatonic writing, and it's a lovely piece. Now, Ruth Gipps, a composer I have to tell you I had not previously heard of. She wrote her first piece at age 8, and even more remarkably, sold it to a publisher for 1.5 guineas in 1929, the equivalent of about $8, I think. She was both a performing pianist and an oboist. Her teachers in composition included both Gordon Jacob, whose viola and piano sonatina we heard yesterday, and R.V.W. I have to be so careful how I refer to him, because all my life he was R.A.L.P.H., but I can't say that here, or I get into terrible trouble. So R.V.W. Like Glanville-Hicks, she was a feminist, but never accused either teacher of plagiarism. In her 3.5-minute The Piper of Dreams, we have an oboe solo, really solo, no accompaniment, and written by a player of the instrument who knew just how to reveal its beauties. The fairly slow opening you noticed, of course, the lowered leading tone. That would have been the raised leading tone. Surprising note there. Well, that slow music, lovely melody comes back at the end, and in between you get some lively episodes. The last 2 notes show you pretty much the usable range of this instrument. You can go a little higher, but it's risky, and you can, if you go down lower to there, the notes are quite difficult to play softly. So she chooses to end, her cadence is to outline the range of the instrument. The Piper of Dreams dates from 1940. I can't help but mention that Benjamin Britten's 6 Metamorphoses after Ovid, also oboe unaccompanied, was composed in 1951, 11 years later. Now, if you've never heard of Constant Lambert, be sure to check out on YouTube An Audience with Peter Ustinov for a hilarious and irreverent impersonation of Lambert as he was being introduced to Queen Mary. He was a writer, conductor, and composer, founder of the Royal Ballet, and friend of John Maynard Keynes, who said he was the most brilliant man he, Keynes, had ever met. His Elegaic blues on our program, as our program note tells us, was written in memory of the African-American singer Florence Mills. She was known as the Queen of Happiness, and she died at age 31 after giving 300 performances of the hit show Blackbirds in London. You get its flavor from just the opening chords. It's marked Lugubre ma con moto. Now, Samuel Barber's Serenade, it was composed at the age of 18. It caused his uncle and influential mentor, the composer Sidney Homer, husband of opera singer Louise Homer, to worry over young Sam's, and I quote here, almost too apparent maturity. It seems as if you are going to skip youth and jump into the maelstrom and complexities of a mature man. Homer went on to remind that Mozart and Schubert, quote, kept the spirit of youth through their entire lives. I don't know about Maelstrom, but the opening violin melody is fairly chromatic. It's a set with some mysterious chords. But after this slow, chordal, almost hymn-like opening, you get a change of character, speed up of tempo, and that melody becomes a quick melody, almost like a march. And these two tempos, the slow and the fast music, are rather cleverly integrated in this short first movement. The second movement is a slow, lilting 6/8 time. The third, called Dance, a light-hearted triple time. If you're surprised by the quiet and rather undramatic ending to this third movement, the reason may be that a fourth movement seems to have been written and then disappeared by the time of publication in 1942. How that could happen, I'm not sure. By the way, I recommend to you Howard Pollack's new biography of Barber, and there you can read how Sam and his pal Giancarlo Menotti visit Toscanini on Lake Maggiore. They are aged 23. Toscanini plays through the score of Monteverdi's opera Orfeo, himself singing the part of Eurydice, with Barber singing the part of Orfeo. Now that would have been something to hear. 5 years later, Toscanini would conduct the Adagio for strings, one of the most consequential premieres of the 20th century American repertoire. And Barber was 28 at the time. Now, Michael Tippett's first piano sonata takes as its first movement a set of variations. Each variation features a specific piano texture, arpeggiation, octaves, scales, register contrasts. Let's have a look. The theme, with its repeated notes and scale descent, is stated strongly at first and then given a gentle accompaniment. Variation 1 introduces arpeggios. Variation 2, there are octaves alternating between the two hands. And variation 3, we have harp-like scales. And by the way, I'd have played these examples for you, but my harp-like scales just weren't sufficiently harp-like. So Now, variation 4, after a final scale flourish, moves to the upper register with dotted rhythms. Variation 5 reverts to the low register, ominously. And finally, variation 6 is the theme returning triumphant. Now, Tippett's second movement makes gentle reference to a Scottish folk melody of unpronounceable title having something to do with sheep, but it's I can play that whole opening without a single black key. So we have another example of diatonic writing. Oh yes, the third movement is a rollicking presto. I skip that. Now, Barber's and Tippett's pieces date from early in their careers. Vaughan Williams' violin sonata was written when he was approaching 82 years old. Two things struck me when I first looked at the score: the elaborate piano part and the amount of chordal writing for the violin. Only in Bach's solo violin music have I seen such successions of 2- and 3-note chords as RVW writes here. Then I discovered that the great Joseph Szigeti was an early champion of this work. He gave the first actual live performance, that is, performance before a live audience, at the Eastman School in Rochester, as it happens. And it may be that Szigeti was originally the attended dedicatee. If so, a reference to Bach sonatas and partitas makes sense in that Szigeti was famously an early master of that repertoire. His playing of it almost certainly was known to RVW. Now, the sonata begins in an entirely diatonic. I'm sorry to be boring about diatonic, but there's a reason for it. It begins in this diatonic idiom. There's not a single black key in the first page of the rollicking 6/8 part. When I say 6/8, you do know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's the rhythm of so much folk song. Think of Greensleeves. And the piano part goes. And against that, a violin part, slow, steady notes. Some dotted rhythm, of course. Purely diatonic. Not before, before too long, we get increasing chromaticism, increasing sense of urgency, that melody of the violin takes a bit more of the rhythm. It's sped up and it sounds more like the rhythm of the piano part. And it's pitted against itself. And it leads up to a point of where the piano challenges the violin. And the violin unleashes a whole series of double stops and agitation, and then there's another challenge from the piano. More double stops from the violin, finally piano. And a whole series of three-note chords from the violin that comes to an arrival point, and the piano reverts to the tone and manner of the opening. The second movement is based on this rhythm. It's a scherzo. And the last movement, theme, 6 variations on a theme that is presented in this ghostly manner with unusual spacing of octaves in the piano. Needless to say, all on the white keys. Well, I've made this rather extensive point of diatonic and modal inflections. Well, folk song, the inspiration for, and even foundation of so much of the music we've heard these weekends, exhibits both those characteristics. On the other hand, when speakers refer to modernism, they usually mean chromaticism. The more chromatic, the more modernist in sound. Vaughan Williams can certainly reveal an intensely chromatic side. Think of the Fourth Symphony of last Saturday, or the first movement of the String Quartet No. 2 yesterday, or the last movement of Antarctica. But so often, his works begin in diatonic fashion, become increasingly chromatic, and return to the easier to sing, easier to remember opening. This is going to be a wonderful concert. I know you'll enjoy it.